The top box office movies of the 1950s, in the United States that is. So many famous and, for one reason or another, still popular films were big this decade. Much like the top movies from the 60s, family films and historical, particularly biblical, epics were what audiences really deemed worth coming out from behind their new TV screens for. Also, Charlton Heston! You could not get away from the man! Let's take a look year by year to get a feel for what people really wanted to see on the big, and still bigger, as this was the decade of Cinemascope, VistaVision, and other such technological ventures, screen. 1950, Cinderella. Directed by Wilfred Jackson, Hamilton Luske, and Clyde Geronimi. Starring Eileen Woods and Eleanor Audley. 76 minutes long. One of the greats from the classic Disney era and my personal favorite. The classic Grimm's fairy tale gets the Disney treatment, and as with many the company got hold of, it is the most common version remembered today. Gone were the father being alive but non-participatory in his daughter's life. Gone is the ghost of the mother replaced by the fairy godmother. And especially gone are the gruesome but memorable parts of the stepsisters cutting off parts of their feet to fit into the glass slipper. The tale is thus more sanitized for general audiences, but it's still tough in its way. The treatment of Cinderella is shown as lighter than it could be, but still cruel enough to make me tear up every single darn time I watch the stepsisters tear that dress to pieces. Cinderella is not a strong woman, but she demonstrates that qualities like being patient and kind under such circumstances can be just as difficult a thing to maintain, making her stronger than she seems. The animation is gorgeous, the vocal performances are spot on, and the music is full of hummable earworms. There are things you can pick out as dated, sure, but overall, this classic is a classic for a good reason. 1951, Quo Vadis. Directed by Mervyn LeRoy, starring Robert Taylor and Deborah Kerr. 171 minutes worth of the Best Picture nominee from this year. I did a whole video on all the versions of Quo Vadis, the Quo Vadises, so I won't go into it too much here, in case you watched that one and are like, come on, I get it already. And if you didn't, I'll try to remember to link it in the description. To quickly recap, this is a historical fiction tale about Romans persecuting Christians, and although events here are far more glossy and not nearly as harrowing and gruesome as in the book, amazingly for a novel from the late 1890s, it's still a great story about what a stupid thing it is to persecute someone simply for having different beliefs, and how many lives can be destroyed at the whim of one childish dictator with too much power. Peter Ustinov's performance as Nero is one of the greats. 1952. The Greatest Show on Earth. Directed by Cecil B. DeMille. Starring Betty Hutton and Charlton Heston et al. 2 hours and 32 minutes. This famously won the Academy Award for Best Picture. Famously because nobody can quite seem to figure out why. This film was new to me, so I was able to review it with fresh eyes, which is a thing I always like. The story is about the actual, now sadly defunct, okay, there's lots of things that are bad about it, but I have a soft spot for circuses, Ringling Brothers Circus, which was just so hugely popular for so many years. Heston plays the manager of the entire show, going along from town to town, making sure everything runs smoothly. The effervescent Hutton, there is no other word for her, is both his love interest and the star trapeze artist. That is, she's the star until Heston hires the famous headliner and troublemaking ladies' man Cornell Wilde for the center ring, creating both a love triangle and a rivalry between Wilde and Hutton for the spotlight. There's a subplot with Jimmy Stewart as a man on the run from the law, who is hiding in the cast as a clown. We have many other actors in here having fun, including Gloria Graham and Dorothy Lamour in supporting roles. Dottie is pretty funny as well, which it's great to see the Sarong girl getting a chance to show her comedic side. Plus, there's the occasional cameo. The main star here, though, is the circus itself, with many sequences simply being the real acts and performers themselves. A few things of note. Dang, that is a white audience, which is particularly noticeable nowadays. Also, it's just so sad to see the animals all contained like they are. There are parts where they show the circus folks treating them with kindness, but then again, that's a relative term through these passing years. Basically, the animals just don't get any room to move unless they're performing in the ring. Also, I would like to give more of a shout out to Hutton. A trapeze artist she is not, but there is more than one moment where there's no doubt it's actually her performing a trick or two, so good on her for putting in the work. A star for far too short a time, it's really sad she's mostly forgotten today. Her personal life was very rough as well. Look her up sometime, and then watch her stuff. She deserved more. Anyway, the movie itself is really nothing special. It's a long soap opera based on a thin love story. Effects awards were garnered for the train wreck scene, which isn't too bad, but is also pretty short. The only real pathos comes from Stewart's being caught by the fuzz at the end. It's an interesting look at the behind-the-scenes of what is now a bygone era. But if that's your main reason for watching this, a documentary might be the better bet. 1953, Peter Pan. Directed by Hamilton Luske, Clyde Geronimi, and Wilfred Jackson. Starring Bobby Driscoll and Catherine Beaumont. 77 minutes long. Okay, this is another Disney classic based on the also classic story by author James Barrie, who wrote quite a few other books, including The Charming Little Minister. I highly suggest you look him up. The animation is good, and there's no denying the iconic Hans Conried in the role of Mr. Darling / Captain Hook. Also, I don't think I'm alone in asserting that this led directly to one of the absolute best rides at Disney World, that flight over London. However, the film itself is a bit more thin than it could be. There's always been a deep, rather sad yearning at the heart of the Peter Pan story, like what led him and the other children to leave their earthbound homes in the first place, which isn't really touched on here. Needless to say, the datedness of this one also shows through. That Native American scene is rough, and there aren't any good roles for women. The mermaids exist largely to prettify themselves and fawn over Peter, even though they're all kids. I always found this weird. And Wendy is, as so often in this tale, forced as the eldest and the girl into the role of being mother to everyone. She already has to be in charge of her brothers, but now she's being transported to a magical land, and somehow she still has to be the responsible one and doesn't get to have any fun herself. Don't get me wrong, I realize Wendy's role in the story is to show the Lost Boys, and Peter too, how good a thing home and responsibility as well can be, but it's at her expense. And yes, also this was the 1950s, and women are largely secondary in many of these flicks. And personally, I find the songs hit or miss, although Following the Leader can get stuck in my head any day. Fantastic villain Hook notwithstanding, I don't see this as one that has stood the test of time as well as some others. 1954, White Christmas. Directed by Michael Curtiz. Okay, I still don't know how to pronounce his name, but you know, this guy. Starring Bing Crosby and Rosemary Clooney. 2 hours long. Okay. Point of contention. I'll get to that. First off, the plot is simple. Crosby and Danny Kaye meet in World War II and form a song and dance act. After the war, they are on the circuit when they meet Clooney and Vera Ellen, sisters with an act of their own. As the sisters are having financial troubles, they all decide to pool their resources, and after one thing or another, end up at an inn in Vermont, where they decide to put on a big ol' rollicking show to benefit the owner, who is a former higher-up in the army over Crosby and Kaye. There are the typical misunderstandings that occur when love stories are told, but all comes right in the end to the accompaniment of a Christmas-themed finale with the title song. So, that's the plot. Now, this movie has a lot of fans, and seriously, good for them. But I am not one of them. The movie is okay, but I don't find it memorable. I think a lot of this has to do with nostalgia. I did not grow up with this film. I did grow up with the 1941 movie Holiday Inn, also with Crosby, which introduced the song White Christmas and used the same freaking set. That movie is also imperfect, the problematic blackface scene if nothing else, but I personally find it superior. Even though, when you come right down to it, there may not be much to recommend it over this one. This one does have Mary Wicks, who I absolutely love, but it also has what I consider Irving Berlin's weakest song, Snow. Yes, it's freaking snow, I get it, it's not worth saying over and over again, it just, I find it really annoying. And the display piece at the end is just that. It's so staged and pageant-like. Everyone's kind of stiff and standing around. There's no life and no passion to really make me feel the warm joy of Christmas. Are you among the many who love this film? I would really like to hear why. No judgment, I just like to hear your side of things. 1955, Lady and the Tramp. Directed by Hamilton Luske, Clyde Geronimi, and Wilfred Jackson. Starring Barbara Luddy and Larry Roberts. 1 hour and 16 minutes. And I had never watched this one before. I'd never been one much for animal stories, and I even missed a lot of the animal Disney ones. This is one of the last from the classic Disney era. You know, before the animation started getting arguably more shoddy. Although, someone online did recently make the fair point that at least when it started getting kind of grainy in the 60s and 70s, at least that was still hand-done by a person, and you could tell because it looked that way. Anyway, this was a lovely-looking film, one that comes under the heading of a charming little story. The story itself apparently was an amalgam of a Disney employee's experience with his dog adjusting to his new baby, and also a story published in Cosmopolitan about a tramp-ish dog and his adventures. It's a thin, uncomplicated story for the most part. We meet Lady as she is adopted at Christmas into her new family, a young couple at the turn of the last century. Soon enough, the couple has a baby, and then they go out of town for a well-deserved vacation, leaving the baby and dog in charge of their Aunt Sarah. Being a cat person, and also quite obviously not given enough instruction regarding the relationship of the dog to the house, Aunt Sarah completely misunderstands Lady's good intentions and punishes her over severely. Lady escapes and joins up with Tramp, with whom she forms a love connection. Another misunderstanding leads to Tramp's protecting the baby, but then being sent to the pound, so Lady and her friends work together to rescue him. Tramp is then adopted into the family, and he and Lady live happily ever after with their adorable pups. There's nothing deep in the story, just a cute romp with doggos, and very few sad or difficult to watch parts. Except for those racist cats. Gods. And you know, the power of nostalgia is strong. It's the turn of us Gen Xers, Millennials, Xennials, etc., to look back fondly in our childhoods, and it's easy enough to say that things were so great then. But at the same time, I also remember little me being enamored of the Siamese cat song, and not getting that it was so incredibly not a good thing. It just wasn't as addressed in white bread circles, or at least any that I knew, as it thankfully is beginning to be now. Otherwise and overall, it's a sweet little film, no standout for Disney horror films in general, but you don't always need an overwhelmingly amazing story that knocks your socks off. Sometimes you just need a sweet little film, and this one helps to fit that bill. 1956, The Ten Commandments. Directed by Cecil B. DeMille. Starring Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner. 3 hours and 40 minutes. My first time watching this one. I know it as the perennial Easter offering on cable television when I was growing up. However, when I personally was growing up, we didn't have television for the most part, so I missed this among so many other things, which I am now trying to catch up on. Another biblical epic which, unlike the Bible in the 1960s, is more clear about its exact story. This is essentially a biopic of Moses according to said Bible, which makes sense as I don't believe there's any other account of the life of Moses. We follow him from a little bitty baby whose mama is forced to give him up when all firstborn Jewish sons are ordered to be killed. The childless Pharaoh's daughter takes him in and raises him as her own. Eventually, he learns the truth of his origins and immediately gives up his splendorous surroundings to help lead the enslaved Israelites to freedom across the desert and the Red Sea and all that, receiving the commandments of the title at the very end. It's an engaging story and helped fill in some details I forgot about. Also, according to Hollywood, there were a heck of a lot of white people in Egypt at that time. Who knew? Being a huge tentpole film with a huge cast and so many extras, there are many other actors to recognize, such as Anne Baxter, Edward G. Robinson, Dame Judith Anderson, and an oddly beardless Vincent Price. The blue screen is noticeable, and the effects don't necessarily hold up, but they're cool for what they are. I particularly like the animation for the Column of Fire. It also really got me with the scene of Baal at the end at Mount Sinai. Side note, a lot of this movie was filmed on location in Egypt and at the actual Mount Sinai. Very cool as well, and also very expensive, I'm sure. I did recall that part from the Bible story, but it was slightly humorous how fast it all happened. It was like, well, Moses has been gone for 2 minutes, guess he's not coming back, better transfer our allegiance to a big-ass gold statue. People. Anyway, as biblical epics go, well, I haven't seen a ton, but even with Heston, who, in my opinion, has presence but is not a great actor so much, this one really works, for the most part. If you're ready for a heavy 3+ hours, give this a watch. 1957, The Bridge on the River Kwai. 2 hours and 41 minutes, a long one. Directed by David Lean. Starring Alec Guinness and Sesue Hayakawa. First sidebar. I've not seen Hayakawa in much, and I didn't realize he'd had such a long career, but he was in silent movies and became an actual heartthrob in the 20s, and no doubt, just look at him, hot dang. Okay, so, as to this movie. Seen it before, rewatched it for this list, and what a treat it was all over again. In many ways, this film seems ahead of its time. If nothing else, it's not relying on tired racist tropes, but showing the Japanese, and particularly their commander, as a formidable enemy while also very human. Likewise, the encaptured English, and particularly their commander, are human and fallible. Hayakawa and Guinness are said commanders, dueling colonels as it were, both in excellent performances. Hayakawa, as Colonel Saito, orders all prisoners to help build the Bridge of the Title in rural Thailand, to aid the Japanese in their war efforts. If he fails, he will be forced to take the honorable way out and off himself, which he really doesn't want to do. For his part, Colonel Nicholson, or Guinness, is at first in direct odds with Saito, as he refuses to have the officers join in the work and is punished for it. When his punishment is through, he is shown the progress on the bridge, or lack thereof, and his ideals change. Not wanting his men to be associated with work that is less than on par, he takes over the project, insisting that since they must do the work at all, they should do something to be proud of, that future generations will be able to see the good work the English have done even in the worst circumstances. At the end of it all, he comes to see the error of his ways, wartime and all that. Simultaneously, William Holden is a prisoner who manages to escape and is taken in by the British in Ceylon. However, instead of sending him home to the US, they send him back to Thailand with a small group on a mission to blow up the bridge. It's a most engaging plot with great cinematography and finely acted. The ending is excellently suspenseful and equal with Buster Keaton's The General for, let's just say, you're not going to be doing that shot again. I wonder if that was difficult for personal reasons, as David Lean seems to have had a thing about trains. Anyway, this one is just so good. A finely layered story where perspective shows things are not always so straightforward as you might think. 1958, South Pacific. Directed by Joshua Logan. Starring Mitzi Gaynor and Rossano Brazzi. 2 hours and 37 minutes. I had never seen this one, as I'd never been much for Rodgers and Hammerstein. I'm still not. It's not a total loss or anything like that. It just didn't grab me. The story is set during World War II, following the Navy at a base on an island in the area of the title, with romantic complications. A nurse falls for a Frenchman who has been living there in exile and has 2 children from a previous marriage, his native wife having died some time before. There is also a young fellow new to the island who falls in love with a native girl. Both men engage in a dangerous mission, and only the Frenchman survives and presumably marries the nurse at the end. That's about it. The interesting things here are, first off, the Frenchman, Rossano Brazzi, how French can you get, does not tell Nurse Forbush, Gaynor, about his children at first, fearing her reaction. When she finds out, the excuse is made that you don't tell a girl about something like that right away. I'm sorry? Wouldn't this be good information to know going in? Also, I'd heard much of the music, but didn't know all those songs were from this particular musical. You've Got to Be Carefully Taught surprised me right between the eyes, as I was already highly skeptical that the white boy would ever even consider marrying the native girl, and was pleasantly amazed that they even addressed the topic, let alone in such a clear manner. The third thing was, to me, just odd. In a musical, they cast a whole bunch of people who either couldn't sing or apparently had a different sounding voice than they wanted for the film. Brazzi is dubbed by Giorgio Tosi. This one is really obvious. John Carr's the young fella Cable is dubbed by Bill Lee. However, we also have Ken Clark in the minor part of Stewpot, dubbed by the instantly noticeable Thurl Ravenscroft. And, very strangely, Juanita Hall as Bloody Mary, who originated the part on stage, but here was dubbed by Muriel Smith, who also had played the part in Drury Lane Theatre. Smith dubbed voices for several other films and had a very interesting career. I highly suggest looking her up. I'm just wondering why she wasn't cast in the part in the film. She was black. Could that have been a highly hypocritical reason movie? Otherwise, I don't know what it is. The plots of Rodgers and Hammerstein just don't tend to grab me, so I think that's my issue. Also, I felt it was overlong, and the use of filters got old real fast. Now, it was cool to see Billy Jack's Tom Laughlin in a supporting role, and Mitzi Gaynor was mostly engaging. Mary Martin, who played that part on stage, would have done so here, but her onstage co-star Ezio Pinza passed away, and it was felt that pairing her with someone else just wouldn't work. I really feel the trivia is more interesting than the film. What do you think? Is this one of your favorites? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one, too. And finally, 1959, Ben-Hur. Directed by William Wyler. Starring Charlton Heston and Jack Hawkins. 212 minutes. Hawkins was also in a supporting role in Kwai, and looking at his career, it's sadly amazing how many movies I've seen him in, but I don't remember him. I seriously feel really bad about that. So, Ben-Hur, I actually watched for the first time last year. Another epic with Heston. As said, this was his decade to rule the box office. Heston plays another Jewish fella, landed and with money, who gives it all up out of principle, and then is enslaved through a misunderstanding. After some time, he helps his fellow slaves and saves a Roman's life, leading to his being adopted by said Roman, and trained first as a gladiator and then as a champion charioteer. Hearing his mother and sister have died, he participates in the grand chariot race against those he deems responsible. He then finds out his family is alive, but they have become lepers. He rejects his Roman citizenship and returns to his family, witnesses the crucifixion of Christ, and finds forgiveness and faith as his mother and sister are miraculously healed. So, it's more or less another biblical epic. I was actually surprised about that, as I didn't really know anything about this movie except the much-hyped chariot race. Overall, it's about as good as Ten Commandments, really. It's well done. The sea battle particularly is also neat, but they are not kidding. The chariot race is where it's at. I watched the whole thing positively aghast at the level of planning that went into all of it. Apparently, the sequence just prior to the race is a shot-for-shot remake of the 1925 version. So, yes, now I'm gonna have to watch that. The set itself was the largest ever constructed at the time, and the planning took an entire year. The filming itself took 5 weeks, which was spread out over a period of 3 months. Wow. Wow. This is the sort of thing I watch films for. So, there you have it. There was the 50s decade in the most viewed movie screens. I guess that's the way of putting it. I will repeat your comments on any of these. I would love to hear your views. Seen them? Not seen them? Want to or no? And why not? And just leave it all below. I'll see you next week. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye for now.